but there was always one person who was supposed to be doing X next to us. And by the time every day, it's like that person, because they're funny or whatever, they would get pulled out and they'd get to go be in the face with the customers. Well, the rest of us are behind the scenes and you're sweating and your back hurting your feet. And that person, they're always like, we'd get done and we'd go meet up in the suite or whatever. And they've been in there for hours. I mean, that is a morale breaker.
Yeah.
That is like, why is this person being treated? Why are the rules different for this person?
Yeah. So with the team, they operate one way, maybe a little bit more domineering when they're in the, and more or less collaborative, but when they're in front of leaders or influencers or such, then it kind of switches. So they're taking credit for work that they either partially did or didn't do.
They always did things like they were thinking of other people and they brought stuff in. So there's very good traits about it. But yeah, because I don't like to drag out conflict or I want to deal with stuff, I always found that frustrating, is that they treated it like it was a negative, and it's like you're causing it to be a negative because we're not dealing with stuff, right?
Yeah.
The avoidance part, it actually has a negative impact on the team, I think. Hey, welcome back to the Agile Couple with Kevin and I. The last episode, if you joined us, we talked about 3 workplace personas. We talked about the ghost, the gatekeeper, and the firefighter, which I think most people can relate to each of these personas as we go through them over the upcoming episodes. Today, we're going to talk about 3 more. So today, we're going to talk about the peacemaker, the credit collector, and the perfectionist. So, Kevin, to kick it off, how would you describe what the peacemaker is?
So the peacemaker is always going to be the one that's they're going to want to have harmony within the team. They oftentimes don't like conflict.
Yeah.
And because of that, oftentimes they'll take things on personally that the team is doing. And in turn, what that does is it can kind of negatively impact them and their morale, just because they want to make sure everybody else's life is going better. So oftentimes they'll be the ones that take on the pain for the team.
Yes. Whether or not the team is asked in any way for that.
Exactly.
That's just an embodiment of what they do.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So you brought up conflict,
Mm-hmm.
because I do think the people that I know that kind of work as the peacemaker, they just want to let's just keep everything status quo. And it doesn't actually help the team in my view. I usually find that it's like you're just kicking the can and you're making it a worse situation. But I think you sometimes embody some of the peacemakers. So can you speak to some of that? Like, what's that? Why might they do that? And like, what's the effect of that?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is the conflict avoidance.
Yeah.
That's the thing that probably gives them the most anxiety. And that's something that even over my career and my life, it's taken time to get comfortable. And I think part of that goes back to what we talked about before, which is just having that self-awareness of who you are, and then being able to equip yourself with strategies on being able to mitigate that. But yeah, I mean, I definitely would consider myself a peacemaker. It's also, there's kind of a caring aspect of it.
Yeah.
As an example, when I used to go snowmobiling, I'd always be the last one in the line, because that way I could keep everybody in front of me. So if anybody broke down, I was there to help them.
Yeah.
But that also means that I put myself in a position that if I broke down, there's nobody behind me, right?
Yes.
But that's kind of the attitude that the peacemaker has, is they want to make sure everybody else is cared for and taken care of before their own needs.
Yes. At their own detriment. Sometimes, right?
Sometimes,
exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah. So I think those people generally like to be the liked person on the team, and just like, yeah, for me, like I can think back to even early on working, and they were always the one that baked goods. They always did things like they were thinking of other people and they brought stuff in. So there's very good traits about it. But yeah, because I don't like to drag out conflict or I want to deal with stuff, I always found that frustrating, is that they treated it like it was a negative, and it's like you're causing it to be a negative because we're not dealing with stuff, right?
Yeah.
The avoidance part, it actually has a negative impact on the team, I think.
It could.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
it can. So it's more of like, I think there's a lot of peacemakers, and there's a lot of good to a team having people who are thinking about others and the glue of the team and, having awareness of other people and what they're going through. I think they generally have a lot of empathy. And so they pay attention to things that maybe some of the others don't.
Absolutely.
So that's definitely good.
I can personally attest to that.
Yeah. But I do have a note here that says the reinforcement that disagreement, or we want to reinforce a disagreement, does not equal dysfunction.
Yeah.
So disagreements are actually healthy. The longer that is prolonged, I think, is when it turns into conflict. So conflict almost has a bad connotation, right?
And I think you have to have, as a leader and you're working with somebody in that situation, you have to have empathy yourself and some patience.
Yeah.
Because that's naturally where they live. So pushing them outside that comfort zone, if you push too hard and say, listen, you need to be, more assertive, that could be counterproductive. So yeah, it's just dealing with these little creatures called human beings is always interesting.
Well, one of the notes that we have, and I was thinking about this from a leader perspective, and it could be, you might not be the manager or a leader, but part of a team where you maybe take on the leadership role, is that let's say you have something going around and you're trying to make decisions and there's differing opinions around a table. Knowing that, so this is part of knowing your team, which is why we do assessments and we want teams to do that. But knowing these sort of things about people on your team is that if I said there's controversy and there's 8 people on the team and there's 3 different people who think we should go 3 different ways, I should probably go to that person that's the peacemaker last.
Yeah.
So because they are not going to answer early on, they are going to take all of that in and they're going to explode, right?
Yeah. It's kind of like I said before, like my example of the snowmobiling, right? You want to get the full picture before you speak up. You want to give everybody else the opportunity. And it also, I think one of the strengths of the peacemaker is they do try to take everybody's opinion in before they say something. But it is that same mentality, which is, if you wait until the end to ask them opinion, you're probably going to get a much better response as well, because one, that's in their comfort zone. And secondly, they've already absorbed all the other input. So when they do, say something, it's usually going to be something that's valuable.
Well, and the heat is probably already exchanged as well. Right. So there's some time.
So you help them avoid the conflict as well. Yeah. Yep.
Well, that's really good. Okay. So a couple of the impacts that I had, real problems might get buried, which is the whole avoidance thing, conflict avoidance. The peacemaker burns out emotionally, which we talked about. And then unresolved issues might resurface later as bigger problems, all the things we just said.
Bad news doesn't get better with age.
It does not get better. So if you are a peacemaker or a peacekeeper, you probably need to build some sort of guardrails for yourself on like, how do I manage? It's not going to go away. Right. And it doesn't matter if it's work or if it's at home. These things are going to happen. If you're a leader, you need to have conversations with these people and have conversations with your team and come up with a plan about how we're going to deal with these situations when they arise, because it's not an if, it's when they do, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. That's good. So the peacemaker. Okay, the next one is what we call the credit collector.
Yeah.
Not my favorite. Describe what some of those characteristics would be.
So the credit collectors are those ones that sometimes, I don't want to say it's two-faced, but sometimes you get different behavior depending upon who the audience is. So with the team, they operate one way, maybe a little bit more domineering when they're and more or less collaborative, but when they're in front of leaders or influencers or such, then it kind of switches. The whole meaning behind the credit collector is they're taking credit for work that they either partially did or didn't do. So those are the things that, and I know, I mean, we've all run into that, through our careers or life in general. But yeah, that's kind of the general description.
I think they're a morale breaker generally. I'm trying to think of a positive for my association with people with this type of characteristics. That's not generally good. And I can think about a person that we're dealing with right now, and they haven't done it to us, but they show up in meetings and you can tell. And I've heard other people that work with this person say that was actually came from me, and then they sold it as their thing. Everybody knows it. Maybe upper leadership doesn't know it, but if they're paying attention, they would figure it out, because they're generally not the ones that are in the trenches doing the work and doing the stuff. But they're kind of a morale breaker.
Yeah. Definitely an anti-pattern.
Yes.
In the team.
Not somebody you want to model your team after, right? And I have actually back in the day worked with the gentleman who, when I lived in Montana, we were a small business, but it was starting to boom. And there was minority ownership, and they had been taken over by a big multi-conglomerate kind of company with people from people from California came, people from Chicago, people from all these bigger cities came to this small town. And one of the guys that I ended up hiring, he sold himself as a shark. And I'm like, that he was very proud of it. And he'd walk around it, but it was like very much, not that it was exactly this behavior, but I could sniff it out. Like there was some of this that was like, if there was a good idea somewhere, the shark was going to take it and then he was going to sell it. But if there was accountability for bad decisions, he was nowhere to be found, type of thing. Right. So I think everybody has some relating to this. So I'm going to read some of these things that we've got. You talked about them taking credit, not just for the work, but publicly when things go well. It's like, yeah, like we're all looking going, we've been here. We're like back when you were doing software teams and you'd be in there over the weekends and all the, what did you call those? The marches? Death marches. And like people are in there, the people that weren't there and you've been doing this for week in and week out and week in and week out. And then all of a sudden they're at the end, they're celebrating.
Right.
It's not a good feeling. It's hard to have any respect for somebody like that.
Yeah.
If they showed up and they hadn't been there and they're like, good job, you all, I appreciate you doing, that's a different thing than to act like they'd been there the whole way.
Yeah. And I would say that the credit collector is definitely probably more leans on the negative side as far as the impacts are concerned. But that's not to say that that's the state that they're always going to be in. Right. So, part of what we're doing here is how can you help, people change that behavior?
Yeah.
And the first thing is, make them aware of it. If they're not already aware of it, bring up examples and say, do you understand the impact that you have when you do this?
And why are you doing that?
Right.
So actually just simple things like literally having goals and having constant feedback loops and doing 360 reviews with the team around them. That sort of thing is going to pop up. Not right away because people aren't going to trust the system, but you got to build it. But if you don't have accountability and the expectations built in, then and you ignore it.
Yeah.
It's going to continue to happen and you're going to lose good people. Well, that is definitely one thing where people are like, I'm leaving this crazy environment.
Yeah.
I want to go feel like I'm appreciated and where I'm adding value and it's being recognized.
Not my circus, not my monkeys.
Yeah, yes, exactly. So maybe why they behave this way is deep insecurity about being overlooked or undervalued. I can think of some people who maybe show up sometimes like this. I don't think they live there all the time, but there's insecurity or a lack of, I don't know, for whatever reason, a lack of showing up in the work. So then this is how they show up. So it just like they think it kind of covers that they are in the wrong position or didn't contribute or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Right. So I hope it's not an all the time thing. So, and I think that there's some cultures that are set up where people might emulate these behaviors, but it's not really who they are. So I can think of like sales cultures where they make it where it's like this. And then you end up, you kind of emulate some of this without meaning to because the way that the system's been set up.
Yep.
So there's like a winning spotlight and it's kind of, I'll step on your head to get here or whatever that is.
Well, and I think as leaders as well, if you're not in tune with that type of behavior, and if you are just sold by the fact that they're the ones that are always getting the credit,
right,
then that also has a slippery slope that you may be promoting or encouraging that behavior, right? And in doing so, it's detrimental to the team. You're setting up a behavior model that you don't even know is undermining the morale of your team.
What are you incentivizing?
Right.
You kind of need to focus on that. I can also think about, oh my God, forever ago, we used to work, we'd run these big conventions and stuff and everybody's out there and it was like hard work. You're on your feet for 14 hours a day on concrete and whatever. And, it was fun. You've got to travel and get away as a whole group. But there was always one person who was supposed to be doing X next to us. And by the time every day, it's like that person, because they're funny or whatever, they would get pulled out and they'd get to go be in the face with the customers. But the rest of us are behind the scenes and you're sweating and your back hurting your feet. And that person, they're always like, we'd get done and we'd go meet up in the suite or whatever. And they've been in there for hours. I mean, that is a morale breaker.
Yeah.
That is like, why is this person being treated? Why are the rules different for this person?
Yeah.
And kind of, if that person, it's like, why wouldn't they go with it, right? It's an easy, who wants to go work back there and do it? So that was more of a leadership thing that they should have recognized that with the team. So I think it shows up lots of different ways.
Yeah.
So impact on the team obviously causes resentment. I think we can all see that. Discourages collaboration. Yeah, you don't want to collaborate with somebody like that because it's fake, right? You're going to ride on my back the whole way, right? Good people are going to stop speaking up, and I'm afraid that good people will actually leave. As I said, the team morale is going to collapse, and then innovation. And it's going to stop because why do I come up with ideas if you're just going to take my ideas or you're going to sell it as your own? You added a quarter of it and I did 3/4 and now it's yours or whatever. Yeah. So I think be really careful with these type of people on your team. So I think we talked about this. So transparency in where we're at, what's expected, how we're showing up, how can we give feedback from the managers on down to the whole team? Like all of that needs to probably be included. Highlight team wins publicly, not individual ones. I like and don't like that. I like to reckon it. We just actually had a meeting just yesterday where we recognized somebody who was in the trenches and was always there. And sometimes that really makes sense, but everybody knew that that person did the work, right? So I don't know if I totally agree with that all the time, but I think you do need awareness of we couldn't have been here without everybody contributing. So don't just highlight somebody who is fun or whatever the sale thing is. So clarify roles and responsibilities to prevent credit grabbing and coach them on long-term reputational damage of the behavior. Those are some ideas you might do to kind of help lead through something like that. Okay, the last persona we're going to talk about today is the perfectionist. So share with me your perspective on the perfectionist.
So the perfectionist, and I've got a little bit of an element of this, but the perfectionist is really, the phrase I always use is polishing the cannonball.
Yeah.
Which is, in that type of scenario, the cannonball, when it's, shot off across the battlefield, it's going to do the damage, whether or not, you polished it or not. Right.
Yeah.
So it's more that functionality versus, the bells and whistles on it. One of the traits that I think perfectionists fall into a trap is when it comes down to deadlines, because they never feel like it's really at the point where they want to present it. Because sometimes, like in software development, in my industry, that's kind of like your craftsmanship. So the quality of your code.
It's a representation of you.
It's a representation. Yeah. So I think part of it is you have to recognize, at what point do we meet the requirement and we move on to something else, knowing that we can come back in the future and be able to adjust. And I think that's the thing that, from my experience, helps mitigate the impact of the perfectionist, is being able to get them in line and just setting an expectation that, hey, this isn't the last time you're going to see this particular work. You've got an opportunity in the future, but right now we need to get something out and working.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting thing. So, because you've said that to me over the years, we don't need to polish the cannonball. And I was like, I'm just going to finish this bit, whatever. Like I'm rationalizing it. I don't have a problem hitting deadlines, but I definitely relate to some of the bits about this. And I think for me, it shows up when I'm under extreme stress, for whatever that might come from. And I think our business partner in another business that we have definitely has this too. So it'll be funny when we interview him to kind of ask him about it. But I definitely, we've got a point here, like might avoid delegation because nobody does it right. That is definitely a me trait where it's like, I just want to have it the way I know that it needs to be.
Yeah.
And I need to work on that. And it's probably about better communication, giving better guidance and better prototyping.
What's the consequence of that? You not delegating.
Is that I just take on more and that person
so
doesn't get to grow.
Bottleneck, right?
Yes. Yeah. Experience high anxiety during review cycles. I mean, I guess we don't live in that world anymore, but.
So this is where I'll show our audience a little bit how this manifests with you, because in training, we always do our surveys at the end, right? And you have had situations where you had a class and say you've got 20 people in there, you get 19 stellar, but one gives you like a little bit of a knock, and that's the one that you fixate on.
Yes.
I think that's that perfectionist type of mindset, right?
Yes.
So, it's the mitigation of that is, delegate, because delegation takes the pressure off of you. You don't become that single choke point. Plus, the delegation, when you're dealing with a perfectionist, also allows other people to grow into those opportunities as well.
It is true. And it's a hard thing because you do rationalize it. I recognize it. And there's an intellectual part of me that's like, this is kind of ridiculous. I'm at a 97% or whatever, but what's up with that 3%?
Right.
Yeah, I know. And I think I've improved on it, but it does pop its head up sometimes for me. And so why they might behave this way, I think this for me is sometimes there's a fear of judgment of failure. I don't fail. Like that's a line for me. Like I just don't. And so I'll do whatever I have to do to make sure that something is successful. which my youngest son does not have, which is very frustrating to me. Like he is not incentivized by the same things that I am. It's just a very differing way to think.
Yeah.
And so some of the, I don't think I have this past punishment for mistakes. I don't have that, but I could see other people that I've worked with where depending on their prior jobs or situations they've went through, so they don't ever want to go through something that's happened before.
Yeah.
Mine's more about, I think it's just my disc style and just who I am and how I don't know. You know, you've learned how to behave over the years, and I've kind of always been self-promoting. So nobody ever checked on my whole school or any of that. I figured it out on my own the whole way along, paid for it all, did all of that. So I think I've built that up, that it's like, can't let a crack in because everything that I've done so far has worked, right? But there's an exhaustion level to it.
Right.
And I think it's hard for other people to work with. Okay, let's see. Control is a safety mechanism, unrealistic self-standard shaped by childhood culture and prior workplaces, which is literally what I was just talking about. So what are some of the impacts? You said, obviously people can't grow. You said bottleneck. It can cause bottleneck, which I see that with our business partner too sometimes. He and I both do it. And so we actually, it's a good offset because we'll recognize it in one another. Yeah. Well, you do not have that.
No.
You have it in a different way, the polishing, but it's more of a procrastination thing. And they show up differently, but kind of same characteristics sometimes, right? Some people fear criticism, and so there might not be a psychological safety on the team or in the environment. And then burnout, like we talked about.
Well,
so,
and one of the other
go ahead.
impacts, the micromanagement.
Yes.
Because you're the perfectionist and you think you're the only one that knows how to do it right.
Yeah.
When you do delegate, you still sometimes will, a perfectionist will still get involved and critique, which
Right.
that has a negative morale issue as
Right.
well. So, and nobody likes to be micromanaged.
I don't think anybody likes to be
Yeah.
micromanaged. Yeah, it's not. Yeah, so there's usually some other symptom there of why the micromanagement is happening.
Yep.
So a couple of the things you might take under consideration when you're working with somebody on a team that's a perfectionist. And again, they may not only be a perfectionist, it might pop up at certain times. So shift the focus from perfect to effective. So again, how are you incentivizing whatever that is, however that shows up?
Yeah. Or progress over perfection.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Because that's the whole polishing the cannonball. So
Right.
we still need to get it out. So we need MVP. We need this part working. We don't need all of it right now.
Right.
Yeah. So break tasks into stages with clear, good enough definitions. And this all comes down to communication again. So guidelines, making it clear and concise of what the expectations are. And you still might have somebody who just, I don't put out crap work, so I'm going to stay up all night and do this or
Right.
whatever. I don't know how you break that, but so model vulnerability and normalize mistakes, which we do that. And that has been part of what I think has helped me over the years is like, you know what? Through failure comes growth. And everybody's had failure, but there is maybe for the perfectionist is finding those things. It's like, listen, everybody at your level of perfection is nowhere near what everybody else is expecting. And you still hit it out of the park. Right. Type of thing. So yeah. So provide support and letting go and trusting other and emphasize iteration. Done is better than perfect because it lets us learn. All right. So those were the three we're going to talk about today. I guess. So we have several more of these to go through on the next upcoming episodes. It's kind of fun just to walk through these. If you've got other thoughts or feedback you want to share, we'd ask that you follow us so you can like, comment, share this information, share our episodes with other people you think would be helpful with, and make sure you subscribe, at least on YouTube, so that you don't miss upcoming episodes. So I guess we'll see you next time.
All right. See you.